All right. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Dasmil Peacock, and this is my midterm project presentation for Women, Gender Studies, Race, Sex, Science. And the title of my project is called Exploitation of Sarah Baartman. So, what exactly does my title imply? Well, my title implies what my project will be about the exploitation of Sarah Baartman and her time in London and Paris. So more specifically, I'm using the exploitation of Sarah Baartman and how explaining how it was used to justify and solidify superiority and inferiority dynamics between whites and Africans. So to start, one major key point is how Sarah Baartman was exploited through her body during her shows. As you see in this image here, this is a depiction of what would go on during the shows of during Sarah Baartman's shows. At the time, for context, at the time, European men and women were not used to seeing African women. Seeing African women and men was still very rare, especially in London and in cities such as London, France, at the time. So generally, the Europeans were fascinated. They were driven, like not fascinated, but yeah, fascinated with the African, especially Sarah's body, her robust hips, I guess uncommonly large breast, and even the pigmentation of her skin, um, and the texture of her hair. They're all enticed um, the Europeans. So during the shows, as you see, this man, this man here to the left, seems to be reaching for her buttocks. And during the shows, there would be a time where the audience would be allowed to touch certain parts of her, like her breast, her buttocks, even, even her hair, because they was fascinated with the texture and coloring and everything of her skin, hair, and all that. So so that was one major point, using her body and basically showcasing it to men and women to show them how different she is, how different African women are from the norm or European men and women. Also, during her shows, they would give her tight and these clothing that would pretty much match her, that would grip her skin first and foremost, and coloring that would like match her skin. So later on in the presentation, I have another image of a movie called Venus Neor, where they have her just in such clothing. So also another point. Well, this is a quote from one of the passages. I believe it's Paris, the City of Lights, where scientists, as the quote reads, scientists married primitiveness to sexuality, the instincts, and urges, revealing the essence of the lower species. So, in addition to not only showcasing her body, they portrayed Sarah Baartman during her shows as this very lustful creature. Not creature, but they portrayed her as such. Henceforth, that's why they gave her the clothing, and the looks that the clothing she would wear during her shows. So during her show, so not only did she have large hips, robust hips, large buttocks, and uncommonly large breasts, and everything. All that men and women find to be, attractive and lustful attributes of the body, but they use that in coordinates to get this message that lust is a primal instinct. It's something that can't that only people, civilized beings can like control, and that since Sarah Baartman has such a lustful body and has such a lustful savagery nature, that this by default makes her lower than European women and men, essentially. So that was another point using that. So as I mentioned earlier, this the picture to the right is a scene from the movie that came out in 2010, Venus, New York, or Black Venus. I need to double fact check that. But the get-ups they would give her, well, you see to highlight her curves, her breasts, and yet at the same time show the tradition of they would um what they would wear in comparison to what Europeans would wear. And many would see her traditional necklace, head wrap, that mid piece going around as primitive. Also, the picture to the left is also a drawing made made at the time of how Sarah Baartman was portrayed, essentially. So not so they exploited her body and portrayed her as to be the savage. As the from as a scene from the movie Venus New York, you'll see.
Tourne-toi. Tourne. Allez, tourne. Allez, tourne.
This is a clear example that part of the show was to showcase her savagery. You see, he has a chain collar around her, and then he's commanding her. And in this scene, you see him mount her as a sign of subjugation to demonstrate that European men or European white people, the white race, is dominant over Sarah Baartman and Africans in general. This is a clear example of how Sarah Baartman's shows and exploitation was used to solidify the dynamics of superiority and inferiority between Africans and whites. This audience, again, like I said, had probably never seen an African woman in their lives. So first impressions matter. So if your first impression is such as this, you're prone to think that by default African men and women are to be subjugated by you. You control them. They're savages. They cannot that you are the superior being to them. And that's what exactly her shows did as a result. So her shows also caused a lot of sexual vulnerability. The shows promoted the idea that African women are lustful, sex driven tools to be used, and generally stripped them of their humanity, that they were a subspecies and a subspecies that have their own savage feral language and to be spoken, um, basically to be commanded and not be treated as another person. And so another point that helped solidify, like I touched on it a little bit earlier, but another key point to help solidify that dynamic of superiority and inferiority is that, again, think of the location where this show took place. First in London, then in Paris. Sarah Baartman's short-lived career, but highly grossing fame. Sarah Baartman became practically famous because the cities, London and Paris, had such a minuscule population of Africans that it was rare, extremely rare to see one, especially African women with her body. So her performing these shows in London and apologies, I had a slight interruption. As I was saying, um, I lost my train of thought. Um, Paris, London, minuscule population. It was rare for African women such as Sarah to be seen. So you given all so when people would come to these shows, all never seen in an African woman before. All saying she's a savage from the other world, Africa, from the continent of savages. And this helps spread the idea. So that's again was your first impression, and you see that savages, I mean not savages, but Africans were to be subjugated. Again, that's what will happen. As a quote from London Calling states, Sarah Baartman was an African woman in a city with a small black population, a few black women. With the appropriate dress and presentation, her bottom could be rendered grotesque. So again, with that being said, the way she was dressed, the location, everything plays hand in hand with solidifying that African women cannot be the same species or the same being as European women. That's essentially what this show did to showcase how different Africans are from your standard European woman. You fear what you don't know, but if what you're seeing it shouldn't be, you shouldn't see it as fear. You'll try to subjugate it and I guess tame it basically, and that's what happened with these shows. And then another was Cuvier's dissection. George, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name, but after Sarah passed away in 1815, her body was sent to quote unquote known as the French zoologist and naturalist George Cuvier, and he dissected her body. And what he during his presentation stated that she was more that African women, Sarah specifically, was more related to apes than to humans. That she was that Africans were the missing link between humans and apes.